So then, once you're in there, it's actually about the delivery, and I've already talked about that. But it's how are you going to deliver? Have you got a one-off session? Have you got a series of sessions? But delivering it, but again, having been aware of all these other things. Because very often you can go in and you think, oh, this is a good idea, and the guys don't know. We did a training session in, what's filming? Oh, it was a filming session. Yeah, we had with multimedia guy, wasn't it, from Sweden? Multimedia session. Because apparently they all, this was about 4 years ago, something like that. Because they all had computers on themselves and whatever. You know, so good idea, organise a session for them. 5 minutes, they're interested in it was an animation workshop. The rest of the time they're talking to each other. Why? Because, as one of the prison guards said to us at the beginning, we don't have a drug problem, we don't have a gang problem. Every prison has a drug problem, a gang problem. But why? Because they only, and this was their policy, I don't know whether it still is, they only let people associate with one other person. They only have pairs to work in, which is against all human rights, and it's there. So when they got into this situation, all they wanted to do was talk to each other because they never had the opportunity to talk to each other. One guy said, oh, my best friend's over there, he's at the inline block, but I haven't seen him for 2 years. So, in a way, if you're getting people like that going in, you need to be careful. You need to be aware what are their needs, but use their needs in order to hopefully buy into what you're trying to do. The other thing is art form products. And these can be very, very positive. In another project, we had examples in England of good practice. All of them involved producing something which involved the whole prison, not just the art department or the education department, which got out to the general public and was a real kind of positive experience for everybody to go into it. So, exhibitions. McGavry Prison, Northern Ireland, Mike Maloney, who unfortunately died last year when he was about to come to Lithuania. Really tragic, but I went, he would organise in McGavry Prison, the biggest male prison in Northern Ireland, an exhibition in the visitors' room. All the prisoners who contributed to it were invited, plus their families, and somebody from outside would come and, talk about paintings and how good they were. A really positive experience. Productions, Bulgaria, as I mentioned, we paid for an artist to work in a prison in Bulgaria. That had a huge effect. So there is a lot of pluses to be done with that. But there are problems. There are notorious problems of prisoners being invited into a theatre performance so that only half of them came back, which, yes, has happened and can happen. In one case, it was in a Swedish prison. The prisoners phoned up from, the escaped prisoners phoned up from Portugal and said the reason we've escaped is not because we want to there, but because the regime is so horrible. They in fact changed the regime, so the prisoners came back with their sentences. But that is very, very rare. So it's a lovely example, but it's very rare. So there are issues. There are issues of security. There are issues of what you can bring in. Also, very often, if people from outside come in, like in this Raben production I mentioned, where you've got sort of women coming in and working with them, it'll be fine as long as it's controlled and organised. Also, and this is something you need to think about, how you're developing the skills with the prisoners. And this is very much about them being able to work on their own. So, when you're there, fine, you can lead a session. But what happens when you're not there and they want to do it? So it's really very, very useful to teach them the skills. And for instance, when I was in Bulgaria in this prison last month, we were talking about how they access multimedia and computers. There was an Australian guy there, and he was saying, well, most of them don't know how to do it. But we have a group amongst ourselves, we all know what to do it, and we're teaching everyone else. So very often you find the prisoners will actually teach themselves if there is the facility. But if you skill them, then they've got that possibility. They've also got the possibility of using that skill when they leave outside. And again, I think that is really important. And finally, and for the project, this is actually a separate assessment task, which is evaluating your work. And tomorrow I'm going to do a session on what is good, effective practice and how do you identify it. Because very often you can go in, and we can do this as teachers anyway, we go in and we think, oh yes, we've done a great job. And then you come later and you think, but why haven't they picked this up? Why haven't they understood that? And it's the same there. And it's probably because you haven't done a proper evaluation of the strengths and weaknesses of whatever session you've done. And this is particularly important in a prison context, to be able to evaluate what you've done. So you can, if it's good, you can repeat it next time. If it didn't work so well, you can change it, because it is that process. So that is module 3. Sorry, I'm aware that I'm going on. So maybe if I leave it there, and I'll finish off either after lunch or tomorrow. Is there any questions on either on module 3 or on the whole concept? Does it make sense? I mean, you're a practitioner, you're working in prisons, yeah? Do you think it covers everything? I mean, you know, not every detail, obviously.
I have a question. Do artists work like volunteers or is
it depends on the situation. Again, it depends on the funding. I mean, it depends on the situation. They may work as volunteers. Most artists, I think, will demand some sort of funding, or they're working for an organisation through which they're funded. I mean, ideally they should be funded, but I mean, again, this is a real issue. I mean, presumably you get funding from somebody, or is that true?
Somebody had a chance to get some funding from their own budget.
Yeah, I mean, prisons will fund it, although it's getting difficult. It's not much. Again, this is the funding issue. What I would be very wary of, and this does happen, is getting students to go in a very kind of unmonitored situation. Because, you know, student groups often say, or, you know, in colleges or somewhere, will say, well, it's a good idea, let's do a prison project, let's take it in. You know, just make sure that they're prepared. But primarily, this is really for artists who would get funding some way or another, professional artists, or people thinking that they're going in, you know, who want to go in.
Yeah, but this kind of modules for people who can go to the prison and teach me some kind of art. He has to be an actual artist, not a person from the outside who decided maybe I would like to work with you.
No, it would be an artist. No, I'm saying that if an artist
will be hard because me and Svaras, another teacher, we were discussing. It's hard to imagine how, for instance, people who do not dance, like I am, like to learn, to teach them like all that gestures, history and everything, and to take them to prison. Will that affect those prisoners? Because it's, you know, it's a really short period of time, and it's pretty hard to give all the practice and experience and everything to that person.
You're not teaching them to dance. We're not teaching them.
I know, yeah, not to dance, but everything that's related to that as well.
Yeah. The idea is that they are experienced in their art form. When I say experience or not, I just mean in working in business. So they may have worked, say, for instance, in another social context.
In art. For art.
Yeah, but they should be proficient in their art. Ideally, they should have been, of course, they're trained. All artists are trained. It is for people. What you're not doing is teaching the art form. You're not teaching them how to use art. You're saying, look, art, but this is a specific context that you do. Yeah, exactly. So you need to be proficient in your art form. That isn't covered by this and couldn't be. There are whole structures and systems. Okay, it's been a long morning, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Dabar mes turime pertrauką.